being patient. Wow. Okay. So here I am, and here I go. I am live. Or for those of you who were watching, who are watching when I was live, thank you for being on with me. I want to take the time out to actually have a conversation about a topic that I wasn't sure I was going to talk about here on YouTube. I really wasn't sure if I was going to actually have this conversation. But before I get started, first, thank you so much for being on with me. Thank you so much for your support here on my YouTube channel. I'm trying to do my best to do as much content like this as possible, something that's going to actually be interesting for people to want to watch and interact with. So I'll just jump right in. This month is, not only April, but it's also Autism Awareness Month. And I am an advocate as it relates to autism spectrum disorder and talking about it in my community, particularly, specifically in the Black community, but then also talking about it in Christian circles and in other areas that I am a part of. And I'm also somebody who has ADHD and who also has autism spectrum disorder. And I actually have, have been unpacking what that looks like and what that experience has been like for me over the last 2 or so years. And I actually was late diagnosed. And I have kind of a long story of that experience. And so I thought it'd be an opportunity to encourage you all, those of you who are late diagnosed, but then those of you who got this diagnosis and what to expect as you process all of this news about what it means um, to be on the spectrum and not know it all this time until later. And I've just thought it'd be a great idea to share my personal experiences. So again, my name is Kendall, and again, thank you so much for joining me here on my YouTube channel. Usually I do a lot of art and tech reviews and a bunch of other things, but I thought it'd be a great opportunity to be able to share something personal about me in order to help somebody else. And which is so funny because lately that's what's been on my heart. That's what I've been led to do over the past few days and weeks as it relates to my writing and it relates to all the stuff that I create. So here's my story. So when I was in elementary school, I struggled a lot with various subjects and I struggled a lot with fitting in. I was the kid that was very, very, very different. I focused on a lot of things that most of my peers weren't really into. You know, I would be the kid that would, actually know what was on the 10 o'clock news the night before, reading newspapers, reading various magazines, various books, things like that, and material and keeping up with the current events. And this is me in like, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, uh, and going into middle school, especially as my love for meteorology and journalism and all things media began to grow. Um, and because of those interests, that actually made me a target for a lot of bullying and being picked on, being kind of a social outcast. I didn't talk like any of my peers, so I would be asked questions by classmates like why do you talk why do you act different, why do you talk different, and I always thought that that was well, I've always thought that that was just absurd and just ridiculous. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that could be unpacked just in that whole conversation of why do you talk like this or act like this, as if one race or one group is totally in charge and in control of a way of dictation and language. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. Um, I also ended up going through a lot of bullying, not only by classmates, but sometimes even by teachers, and sometimes even by family members and relatives. And, you know, being referred to, this is like the 90s. I'm 39 now. I'll be 40 in August. And there were times when I was referred to as slow. I was referred to as a bunch of other stuff. And that's one of the things that I know that I endured during that time. And it was during that time also that I was in special ed and I was getting tested. And when I got tested, they did find that I had ADHD. Now, I had no clue. And I also was not told that there was something that they found. They told my parents, and my mom did not want to go that direction. She dared not want to go that route. I understand now why, because during that time, and unfortunately even now, there is this idea of and this fear of stigmatizing black boys, and pushing them into special ed or into a class outside of the regular traditional class and putting them in different places and positions, where there's a fear of being less successful and then the fear of going on medication, that kind of thing. But I that fear and concern, I understand now why my mother did that. I definitely was not happy about it. I'm not gonna lie. I was upset, very upset to find out that I had ADHD the whole time. And then the way I found out about it a couple of years ago was that I ended up getting tested by a doctor and received a diagnosis of ADHD, subtype inattentive. And to find out from my mother, oh well, yeah, they said that, but I wasn't gonna go into that. And I know there's a lot of other parents that feel the same way. There's even been some parents that are like, no, we ain't gonna receive that because that's not how that's not what God thinks of you. Using spiritual or religious beliefs to try to cover over it, which is not healthy. You know, and of course, I am a Christian. I grew up in the church, and I am a Christian. I do believe in Jesus, but I also know I experienced some of weird uh, ideas and notions about mental health during that time. And of course, now I'm trying to do my best to actually be vocal about it in the black community and in the black church. And we're seeing improvements, but of course, it's heading the right direction. It's getting better, but it can get much better. But again, that's a conversation for another video. I'm also seeing some comments show up on the video here. I want to make sure that I acknowledge that. And I actually will read some of those comments here shortly. So thank y'all so much for that support. Thank you for being on. So the whole experience, because I wasn't diagnosed officially when I was a kid, they ran some tests and they said, oh yeah, we think that we're pretty sure that there's some ADHD here, because there was no desire to acknowledge it. That made school very hard. I was successful later, managed to finish and get out of special ed by the time I was in seventh grade or so. But it was incredibly difficult, and I always found myself still feeling different, still feeling like an outcast. And there was no real reason, no real understanding as to why I was in special ed. So you can imagine what I internalized because I didn't have an understanding of how I was wired differently. I was told, well, you're just slower than the other kids. Well, really, that didn't really bode well in my thinking about myself. That didn't really help with self-esteem. And that certainly didn't help with how I saw myself and saw the world and saw other people. And it just felt like, well, something must be wrong with me. And being into different topics and interests, me having this huge fascination for meteorology and for all things weather and all things news and graphic design, and being a big cartoon and comics fan, and of course being really obsessed into things like Sonic the Hedgehog and reading comics like Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield and all these other things, not realizing just how all of those things would later be, oh, that, now I look back and I'm like, oh, you know what, that, yeah, that I could see how my desire to collect maps and to maintain and retain information and to follow all this information and gather and put together information and to be organized. When I was a kid, and when I played with toy cars, I would line up my cars like they were in a traffic jam, all in this nice and neat order. It was all this stuff that I used to do, and it was something, just looking back, how when I would be to myself, because I grew up as an only child, just sitting around and being to myself was awesome. And I always enjoyed kind of being to myself and being in my own world. In fact, sometimes that's what got me in trouble in school, because I would be so in my own world, I wouldn't be paying attention. But yet, at the same time, I was able to, get past some, difficult courses and difficult people, and be able to survive the school experience regardless of how things looked and how things felt. So, what does the late diagnosed ADHD and autistic experience feel like? It's very, very difficult. It's one of those things where you you go through it, especially if you were not diagnosed during your childhood or in any part of your adolescent years, going into teen years. You're walking around feeling as though something is fundamentally wrong with you. At least that was my experience. You walk around feeling as though no matter how much you try, fitting in is probably not going to happen. And so then you just come to accept that fitting in is not going to be a thing, which I'm grateful for to a point, because having autism and having ADHD, this wiring, you all, I genuinely believe that God made me on purpose for a purpose. I am wired differently to make a difference. And I know that sounds maybe a little bit cliche, and it may sound a little bit different for, and may not totally be enough for those of you who are watching me, because but I'm just telling you my experiences and my testimony. Um, you know, it was, and so for me it was just one of those things where I, I'm glad that I'm wired the way I am, because it kept me out of a lot of unnecessary trouble. I thought about things differently. I thought about consequences. I was very particular and calculated about certain things. And at the same time, I I also struggled with understanding my peers, understanding um, some of the reasons why adults expected certain things from us. I didn't understand girls at all, or relationships in that effect, and that took that made me go through a process where I had to pray, read, research, pray, read, research, and repeat, and go through that whole process as I grew to understand social situations, and build up my social library, whatever, that kind of thing. But the thing is too is that in spite of how challenging my boyhood years were, the formative years were, there were some good people that were in my life who thought that my uniqueness and genuineness and giftedness was something to be celebrated. I look now, in my adult years, I'm about to be 40, and I'm in a place that's very unique, that I know that a lot of people who are ADHD, who have ADHD and who are on the spectrum, they a lot of people don't get to experience the kind of peace and joy that I do have right now, in spite of the challenges that are there, that I do have. And I have this major support from friends who are in the world of media, friends and individuals who are in the world of ministry, who are in ministry, who are in all these other different areas, and close friends, and a loving wife who's incredibly supportive, who is able to kind of help me to be able to see the world in such a way, and to see people in such a way to where I'm giving them just as much grace and mercy as much as they're giving me, which it took a long time to get there. because there was some bitterness that did grow from my childhood years experiences. Things that people just, at one point, it felt like no one could relate to what I was going through and dealing with. And so, what the experience of being late diagnosed ADHD and autistic feels like? Well, I will say this: when I finally got my diagnosis for ADHD and autism, it was a few days before Christmas, and the year was, I want to say, I think it was year, I want to say, y'all, it was 2021. See, I don't want to get it wrong. And I'm so particular about not wanting to get it wrong that I'm pulling the information up right now. I'm trying to pull this information up, trying to pull it up. But it was, well, let me say it like this. It was during the time of, let's see, I'll have this information shortly. Here we go. Here we go. Yep, it was in 2021. And in 2021, it was like 2 or 3 days before Christmas. And for me, getting my diagnosis was like a Christmas gift because it helped make everything make sense. How particular I am about certain sounds, about certain touch, about certain things in my environment. You know, the how I saw the world and saw people, and how I was able to kind of see things differently. So there's a bunch of different things, and there's a lot of different resources, and I hope to be able to share more of them, especially here and everywhere else, especially as it relates to ADHD and autism, because I think it's important. It's one of the reasons why I love cartoons and comics so much. It's one of the reasons why I draw a lot, write a lot. It's one of the reasons why I love doing media stuff. It's it's where I feel the most useful, the most welcome. It's where I feel like I could really tell stories that make sense and that matter. Even doing this YouTube video, it's different for me. It's something that's making me break out of my comfort zone. And I know it's not perfect, but for those of you who are watching and you're listening to this, even if it's just background noise while you do homework or background noise while you do something else, I appreciate that. I really do, because this is not a easy thing to do, because sometimes we don't want to be honest about the challenges that we have. I hate the loud noises of ambulances and police cars that whiz by. I cover my ears. And yet, when I'm at church, and especially when I preach, I don't mind dealing with some of the sounds. Now, if they hit a certain octave or a certain note or level, then it's kind of like, oh, that sounds uncomfortable. But, and then it's so funny because then when I get ready to preach or when I get ready to speak and I get excited, not really bothered. But I tell you what, when I'm in social situations, I do enjoy being around people and being social. Uh, but once that social engagement is over, I need the break. I need to recharge. And so I go somewhere and relax. And I'm so grateful that that my wife understands that and understands, hey, yeah, I can tell he needs a minute to regulate and to chill. I have I have such a better support system. It's one of those things where now looking back, you know, those experiences that were negative, I think, had to happen so that, and which I don't think I would have said any of this years ago and meant it, but now I really do think I'm in a place now where I feel like I mean it, where I could say that those moments that I went through were meant to teach me something about being compassionate and considerate, especially as it relates to other people and their challenges and their experiences. And as I go forward and as I do this YouTube thing, and as I, run my own business stuff, writing and creating media content and create more and more content, my hope is that I'm better and better and better at sharing the experiences. I have a very, very, very low support need as it relates to autism spectrum disorder. But you all, my working memory is shot. It's not great. It is shot. It is SHOT. Shot like a basketball. It's gone. It's one of those things where I have to always take notes. It is for the reason that I love using tech. It's for a reason why I love using notebooks. It's for a reason why I'm always, I got like a ton of pencils and pens over here to keep me focused. Why? Because I don't trust this ADHD brain to remember too much of anything. And yet it's so funny because on the one hand, I'll struggle with remembering something you told me a few seconds ago, but then I can remember like, you know, the you know theme music and the person who created the theme music for some movie that no one has seen, or obscure cartoons from way back when and their theme song, or something random comes up and I remember that, but then I forget to do something like take out the trash. It's an interesting journey. But there's moments where, you know, I think that having ADHD and being autistic also worked in my favor, especially in the world of ministry, being very particular about getting certain things right, especially as it relates to speaking, preaching, teaching, church matters, ministry ethics, just biblical principles through scripture as I study as a Christian, as I try to understand what this walk in the Lord is supposed to look like. For me, that personal experience, what that looks like, discipleship, evangelism, all that, really building relationships with people who do agree with me, people who may not. Then learning how to really ask the right questions, and that's one thing about me that has really helped save my behind in more ways than one. Um, Asking questions, not just so I can understand more properly something, but also so I can help the person that I'm talking to tell me their story and really get really down to the meat of the matter. And which is so funny because sometimes I use things like those phrases, meat of the matter, certain euphemisms. Is that a euphemism? I'm trying to sayings, certain sayings, whatever. We'll just go with certain sayings. I'm just kind of, you know, doing this on the fly. Um, so that's my experience. It is an experience where you have to be okay. You have to process the emotions that come. I know that for me, it was a lot of peace. It was a lot of excitement. I went for months uh, just hyper focusing on the topic of ADHD and hyper focusing on the topic of autism that my wife was like, there are other things to do. I'm like, but this is fascinating. And it really is just the research and then the opportunity to speak up and be an advocate and to really do that in-depth research. Um, it is fascinating. So all that being said, I hope to be able to create more content like this and to be able to help others. And if you're someone that has autism, or if you're or who's autistic, and if you're someone that has ADHD, I'd love for you to give me your thoughts. What was your experience like being late diagnosed? And what was your experience like when you were diagnosed way early on, like during your childhood? And what was that experience? Was it any different from the person who's late diagnosed? And also share some helpful tips and helpful advice and encouragement, because what I hope is that as I create content here, especially on this topic, that it'll help make a difference out here, because there's a lot of people who have no idea what ADHD is and no idea what autism is. There's a lot of misinformation, and I am very interested in making sure that that there's good, solid information going out as it relates to um, what it all is. Well, um, that's all the time I think I have here, and hope that you hang out with me again on the next one. Take care and have a good one.